All right, everyone, we're going to get started in about a minute here. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Hey, Matt, can I get a thumbs up that you can see my screen? Excellent. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second installment of our Crisis Mode webinar series here at Ecos. Today, we'll be focusing on the opportunity in e-commerce and specific strategies to drive revenue through online sales channels. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A section of your Zoom screen, and we'll get to those at the end. I am thrilled to be joined today by John Kelly, the CEO and founder of Craft Peak, and Matt Miller, co-owner of Bearded Iris Brewing. They'll be taking us through a more in-depth dive into the opportunities that exist within e-commerce and how breweries and cideries and other businesses can actually put those strategies into practice. So I will turn it over to them here shortly. But first, my name is Landon Funston. I joined Ecos about 6 months ago as the Director of Strategic Partnerships. My background is actually in operational advisory and transaction management, specifically with startups and entrepreneurs. Here at Ecos, as Director of Strategic Partnerships, my responsibilities are generally to source and execute on integrations partnerships and to build and manage partnerships programs with our technology providers, supply chain partners, and professional services partners. So why are we all here today? Everyone has likely seen this data already, but it is a very stark reminder of the severity of the headwinds that are currently facing the industry. Unfortunately, this crisis is very real, and even with some of the at-home restrictions starting to lighten here in the coming weeks, the economic impact is still probably here to stay. On-premise and direct-to-consumer sales, which are the primary drivers of revenue for much of the industry, are down roughly 65% during the pandemic. And business owners are facing the very real threat of being overmatched. And with that, while survival is and should be the priority, the best way to survive will be to adapt. If you've tuned into any of our other presentations in recent weeks, you probably will have seen this quote, which we like a lot at Ecos. Of course, it would be naive to think that size and scale are not relevant here, because at the end of the day, some businesses just simply have the resource to tough out this crisis. But for those of us that don't, and the rest of the industry, when we look back on this time, a year, 2 years, 5 years down the road, what will be the defining characteristic of the businesses that survived or even thrived during the crisis? Time will tell, but history would suggest that adaptability and innovation, just the overall willingness to try and fail will stand out as the real predictors of success. During our webinar series this week, we are covering a range of areas in which businesses can adapt, including marketing, sales, operations, and finances. But today we are focusing on the opportunity to open up a previously untapped revenue channel. Unfortunately, this crisis has exposed some pretty glaring weaknesses in e-commerce and direct-to-consumer sales within the beer and cider industries. Historically, online beer sales have made up less than 1% of total industry revenues. Now, since April 4th, since the pandemic started, online alcohol sales are up nearly 4.5 times. And this, of course, does include all alcohol sectors, but the beer industry has nevertheless seen a boost as well. But even with that wave of online sales activity, nearly 40% of our Ecos customers still are not selling their product online. We're a little biased, but we do believe that our customers, just by nature of the fact that they run their day-to-day businesses using software, should be some of the most innovative across the industry. If our customers are still hesitant to dive into e-commerce, logic would tell me that the rest of the industry is probably lagging even further behind. And all of that to say, this 40% stat still does not contemplate other e-commerce sales channels such as memberships, clubs, allocations, or selling through third-party channels. Conversely, the wine industry has been building for a crisis like this over the last decade, unknowingly, of course, related to this specific pandemic, but they have well-established direct-to-consumer and e-commerce channels that have helped soften the blow of lost tasting room sales. According to data produced by Nielsen and Forbes, direct-to-consumer sales have actually increased during the pandemic. E-commerce has replaced nearly 70% of lost tasting room sales. Now, this data does contemplate all size ranges within the industry, from the smallest of the small to the largest dominant players within the wine industry. But it is also important to remember, as John will dive into further, you as a business owner have complete control over the direct-to-consumer process. This will be your most profitable sales channel. So any ability to drive additional revenues, that money is going directly into your pocket. Well, let's take a deeper look at customer behavior. Google searches for buying alcohol and beer specifically online have skyrocketed during the pandemic. Even with a notable dip in searches related to the buy alcohol online search term, consumers are still using these searches 6.5 to 8.5 times more frequently than they were pre-pandemic. Same thing goes for the search term beer delivery, which is still up nearly 5 times despite recent dips. Now, the million-dollar question with all this is, are these search trends just a blip tied to the current circumstances, or might they be predictive of a larger changing trend in consumer buying behavior? That answer will probably depend, at least in part, on how businesses capitalize on the current opportunity. Can our businesses take advantage of this spike to dictate future buying behavior, knowing that if you can create habits now, those may predict future sales 1 year, 2 years, and 5 years down the line. While it may not be enough to offset lost taproom sales, we strongly believe in the opportunity here in e-commerce, and we're proud to have partnered with a number of e-commerce platforms, including Craft Peak, who we're thrilled to have today, to offer financial relief to Ecos customers that are willing to take the dive into e-commerce. All of these platforms offer a range of online storefront capability and various features. If you're interested in learning more, you can check out the blog archives on our website, or you can email me directly after this presentation at landon@goecos.com. Obviously, the one notable exception here is DoorDash, which is not an online storefront capability, but they do provide logistics and labor for local delivery. Any Ecos customer that signs up gets their first week free of all delivery fees. As I mentioned in the beginning, we're thrilled to be joined by John and Matt today. Craft Peak, founded by John Kelly, is located in Asheville, North Carolina, and has been leading the digital push in the beer industry since its founding in 2015. John and his team saw the strides that were being made in e-commerce and digital marketing, not just in the wine industry, but also in the beer industry over in Europe. And they wanted to close that gap in beer here in the Americas. Matt with Bearded Iris, he and his team founded the brewery in 2016 in Nashville, Tennessee. And in just 4 short years since its founding, Matt and his team have grown production from roughly 800 barrels in year 1 all the way up to 10,000 barrels last year. Additionally, and part of the reason we were so excited to have these guys on today is that Bearded Iris is facing one of the most challenging and extreme legislative environments in the state of Tennessee. But even still, the team has adapted very, very quickly, making changes to its sales and packaging strategies while still focusing more intently on growing a robust e-commerce presence. So thrilled to have John and Matt here today. And with that, I will hand it over to John.
Okay, Landon, am I coming through for you?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. Yeah, normally I start these things off by talking into mute, so we're already ahead of the curve here. Guys, as Landon mentioned, my name is John Kelly. I am the CEO and one of the co-founders of Craft Peak. And yep, we're based in Asheville, North Carolina, but we really designed Craft Peak to align ourselves with breweries and other craft beverage companies so that we could understand the unique challenges of their businesses, and then help develop solutions and technologies to kind of address those challenges. And really, a lot of that has been geared towards online sales of beer over the last few years, both in Europe, here in the US. So what we're going to do today is really just trying to make this as informative and educational as possible. There's a lot of information that's out there. We're getting lots of questions. So really our goal here is to provide as much insight as we can from both working with our customers, but also the dozens, if not hundreds of conversations we've had in the last 8 weeks. Hopefully this information will be, as we pass it on, will be useful to other breweries. And part of our goal is also to make sure that we'll leave some time for question and answer at the end here, making sure that we have the ability to answer some questions. I think, Landon pointed out that, about 40% of Eco's customers don't currently have an e-commerce program. So we're going to talk a little bit about what it might look like to get a program set up, or if you have one in place, maybe accelerated. And then also some firsthand experience from Matt and his team from Bearded Iris on what that looks like from their perspective. But I think as we get into it here, it's important always to kind of think about e-commerce and the trends that are occurring, maybe in some of the global context of other things that are going on in terms of e-commerce. So if we start to look at the trends and the forces at play that affect what is happening in the craft beer industry, I think we need to take a look at things like consumer behavior, some changes to brand behavior, and then specific forces related to the COVID-19 epidemic. And we know that there's significant challenges associated with COVID-19, but as often in life where there's significant challenges, it's also presenting some unique opportunities to the craft beer space. From there, I think really the first stop, as we kind of talk about what's happening globally with e-commerce, it's important to kind of look at our closest relative, which is really wine. And Landon did a great job of pointing these things out already. But it was a question that really caused us a lot of curiosity and interest when we were dreaming up Craft Peak. Why is there such a difference between what we're seeing in direct consumer sales with wine versus beer? And if we look at it, 11% of wine is sold direct to consumer here in the United States, which represents about a $3.2 billion industry. And it's an industry that's experiencing 14% growth year over year. And the statistics that Landon pointed out is that this is also the most profitable aspect of their business. So not only are they selling a lot of wine, they're selling wine at extremely high margins. And if we contrast that against what's going on in beer, again, it's around 1%, maybe less than 1% that we see in the beer world, which means that we don't have great statistics on the total revenue, and certainly not much on year-over-year growth. Okay, if we're going to have a conversation around e-commerce and direct-to-consumer, it makes sense to talk about the juggernaut in the room, which is Amazon. And Amazon is a $280 billion company as of 2019. And I think it's also, for many of us, the proof of concept that we love buying things online. Over the last 20 years, we've been able to find things that we're looking to buy. We've been able to get those in a cart, pay for them, and then they show up at our doorstep 2 days later in a smiling brown box with free shipping. And any of you that have tried to navigate the challenges associated with shipping beer know that there's no such thing as Amazon Prime where there's free shipping. And if we look at kind of what's happening in the rest of the world in terms of global e-commerce, e-commerce represents about $4 trillion in the global economy, which is about 14% of the entire retail market. And that's also growing tremendously. So about 100% growth in the last 4 years, and that growth looks to be accelerating. So here in the US domestically, about 40% of manufacturers are now going direct to consumers. and brands that maybe were able to, that were, let's say, retail brands that were brick and mortar back in the day when Amazon came to town and that disruptive force of Amazon, the ones that were able to adapt and survive, and the new brand concepts that are coming to market today that are retail concepts, have a very strong component of e-commerce and direct-to-consumer channels. So it's not only that the manufacturers are realizing this, it's the brands that are looking to develop a more direct connection with their consumers. So you may ask, why would a brand make an investment in that? So I think there's three that really stand out here. And the first one is probably the most obvious, and that is higher margins. So as we look to cut out the middlemen, there's more margins for the manufacturers. And if we have high margins, that means we have high profits for the business. High profits mean cash. That cash is the lifeblood of the business. That goes back into paying off investors. That goes back into hiring great people, making investments in infrastructure. So it's essentially what allows you as a brewery owner to make sure that you're not wearing 7 hats and you're down to 2 hats maybe. But it's really, so margins is the most obvious one. But these other two are just as important, but rarely kind of come up in conversation, at least initially when we're talking to breweries. And that's the direct connection with your customers and the ability to control the experience. And why these are so important is because as breweries, you're already experts at this. In fact, you've probably set up your tap room specifically around creating a great experience. And by that, you have a direct relationship with your customers. So I'll walk in a brewery, I'll be able to talk to the bartender about a particular beer. I'll be able to find a style that appeals to me. I'll be able to see the color in a glass, smell the aroma, and taste the beer, and then give instant feedback. Well, it's the consumer insights from those experiences that, if you're running a brand effectively, impact the strategic future and changes to your business. So it might determine what styles of beer we're brewing next, or maybe the next location that we're opening, or the other services or amenities that we might want to offer our customers. So that direct connection and that consumer feedback is really important. And then the third one is really controlling the experience. So once again, breweries have been set up around the experience. It's where we have a communal connection with one another. And what a direct consumer relationship allows you to do is take that same experience that you've created in the tap room and be able to extend that online. And what we're seeing is that it's becoming so much more about the process of how we're buying as it is to exactly what we're buying. And the more meaningful and the more convenient you can make that for your consumer, the more likelihood they're going to choose your beer over someone else's. And just like you use your experience that you create in your tap room as a way to differentiate your brand over others, it's the same in the online space. So really it's the margins, it's the consumer feedback that you get as you connect directly with customers, and the ability to control that experience. Okay, so let's talk about a couple of the forces that are at work specifically related to COVID-19. So shelter in place happened about 8 weeks ago for the majority of the country. Tap rooms shut down. Well, at the same time, what happened were a temporary relaxation of many of the ABC laws from state to state, which in fact, in many cases are making some of these strategies that we're going to go over today even possible. The other trends and forces at play here that we need to pay attention to is social distancing to remain in place. So even as states begin to open and businesses begin to open, I think for a foreseeable period, if not a long-term period, we need to be aware that many of these social distancing restrictions are going to remain in place. So even though tap rooms might be reopening, there's going to be a different flow and configuration to those. And then I think this is what's really exciting and interesting is that if we talked about this being a dynamic environment and not everybody's got it all figured out. And that's certainly the case for us. We're learning every day. But the interesting thing is if we were to have this conversation 8 weeks ago when this first started, with brewery owners, those conversations were very much focused around stopgap measures. What do we need to get in place today to make sure that we've got revenue coming back in the other way, which absolutely makes perfect sense. But at the same time, what we've seen happen over the last 3 to 4 weeks is that now that they have those systems in place, or they've experimented with pickup and local delivery, now brewery ownership is coming to the table, and they're not thinking tactically about this in terms of stopgap measures. They're really thinking strategically about this. And that's been a really interesting shift to see happen, but we have many breweries that are talking about selling 30 to 50% of their beer directly to consumer through the internet moving forward. And they're talking about this being a permanent change to their business model. And then ultimately, guys, when we talk about what does the future dictate? Well, we don't have an idea really of, how quickly or to what extent these laws are going to kind of snap back into place, or if they do. But ultimately, it's going to come down to legislative policy and consumers. And that's really consumer demand. And both of those are kind of influencing the same thing. So the more organized that we get in our associations and our guilds and have more influence and power legislatively, we're also talking about consumer demands where for the first time ever in history, we've had access to brands where we're getting beer shipped to us. And I think from a consumer perspective, if we like that, and I know that I do, and I've appreciated some of those beers, but I think the consumer demand for this is also going to have an influence on policy. So it's really ultimately going to come down to those things. It's going to be legislative policy, but it's going to be heavily influenced by what we're able to do as we organize in our guilds and our associations, and then also the demands from the consumer side. Okay, so guys, when we're talking about e-commerce in a crisis, let's just go ahead and define this, because we know that, as Landon mentioned, there are a lot of different e-commerce capabilities and things that breweries use e-commerce for. So you might be selling tickets to events, you might be selling merchandise or glassware or pre-selling beers or membership clubs. All of those things absolutely are e-commerce. But when we're talking about e-commerce in a crisis here, we're really talking about the revenue that's replacing the revenue from closed tap rooms. So we're really talking about online beer sales, number one, and it fits into three buckets. It's either curbside pickup, local delivery, and shipping both in-state and out-of-state. So that's really what we're going to be focused on here for the crisis segment of this. Okay, so just to level set, there are some advantages to breweries that have the ability to can and bottle. So if your product is in package right now, that makes it very convenient for all three of those strategies. It's easy to run out and deliver, it's easy to have somebody come and pick up, and it's easy to throw in a box and put a label on it and get it shipped off somewhere. But it doesn't mean that you have to do that, because as we look across the country and actually in the UK as well, there are a lot of breweries that are having tremendous success with e-commerce and growler and crowler fills. So just because you don't have anything in cans or bottles doesn't mean that you're out of the game here. Growlers and crowlers are working great. And then from there, it really comes down to this third point is really kind of fits into the fourth one here. It's about getting creative at this point. So is there a mobile canning or bottling line available? Do you have the opportunity to do that? Can you leverage a relationship? Is there a local brewery where there may be canning or bottling line is not fully allocated at this point? So it's really a call to get creative. And if you're sitting there and you say, John, listen, we don't have any of those options available to us. We don't have cans or bottles. We don't have growlers or crowlers. There's no access to a canning line. It still doesn't mean that you're dead in the water. It's an opportunity to get creative. Part of what makes this industry great is the grittiness, the determination, the innovation, and the creativity. So let's rely on that here, and let's think about ways that you can get money coming into the business. The great thing that we've got going for us right now is that there's a bunch of supporters out there that are looking to make investments in your business because we want them to remain viable. So this will be a call to get creative, and we see a lot of great heartwarming stories out there on Instagram as breweries are doing this, and there's amazing stories out there. So search Instagram for some of that inspiration, but we see a lot of breweries selling gift cards, and I'll say one thing about gift cards, just be a little bit careful there, because ultimately what we're trying to do is create long-term benefit for the brewery and the customer. But the challenge with gift cards is if we're sitting at home today and we're buying gift cards, and then you open 2 weeks from now and everybody brings those gift cards in and they want to exchange them or kind of use them at that point, what you're doing is taking kind of a cash flow situation that isn't great, and then the door's open. That's when we want cash coming back into the business, and all of a sudden then you're paying back those short-term liabilities. So my advice here and my encouragement here is to think creatively in ways that you can get those supporters contributing to your business in meaningful ways today, and maybe extend that for a period of time. So let's assume maybe you've got a great beer that's going to be coming out in the fall. Well, go ahead and pre-release it now. Go ahead and have people pay for it now and deliver it in the fall. Maybe think of the gift card concept And a term that we've been throwing around is a beer bond. Like, sell the gift card today, but say, if you hang on to this for a year, what we're going to do is you'll be able to cash in that $20 gift card, and it'll be worth another free beer on top of it, or a free t-shirt. So it'll be worth more in the future if you hang on to it. Or maybe selling a membership that, for $100, $200 that maybe entitle your supporters to a 10% discount when the doors reopen, and they get that for the next year. So once again, the sky's the limit here. Don't be limited by your own creativity, but think about ways that you can give those supporters a mechanism to contribute to the business in meaningful ways today, and then be able to kind of pay that back over the long term, and also encouraging people to come back into the tap room once they open. So, and as an example of that, I'm going to share just a quick one with you here. So I think as I call out there for people to get creative, this is one that kind of stuck out in our network. And this is one of our breweries in the UK. It's Duration Brewing, and what they're doing is they're actually selling an experience. They're selling a virtual tour that's going to happen on May 9th. And what they're going to do is they're going to package up 4 specific beers. They're going to send them out to you. And then on May 9th, everybody's going to get together for a virtual 30-minute tour of the brewery. These guys have built an incredible brewery in the UK in an area where there's ruins back from the 1200s. And it took a lot of effort to kind of get that brewery up and going, but it's absolutely beautiful. So it'll be an amazing tour. You'll get to do a tutored tasting with the owners, Miranda and Bates, have a Q&A. And they're also going to send you a notebook that was designed by a local artist for tasting notes. So I thought this was a kind of an interesting example that jumped out as kind of a creative way to sell an experience. And I thought maybe a little food for thought here. Okay, so from there, let's talk a little bit about regulations and best practices. So you guys are experts at the regulations for your state. And of course, those regulations, the ABC laws, are going to cover the production, sale, and transportation of your beer. The only reason I throw this out here is that as laws are temporary relaxed, and we've got staff room that's out maybe doing deliveries and so forth, just make sure that if any of those laws spring back in action, that everybody has kind of the appropriate certifications. That typically goes without saying with breweries. They're typically pretty well covered. But I know here in North Carolina, where we are, there's even like an online course that everybody has to get in, take for 2 hours, take a quick test, and then you've got a certification that approves you to be able to do that. So just be aware of things like that. I think also proactively, it makes sense to have communications with your wholesale partners. So if you're starting to sell online in areas that might impinge on some of those existing relationships with wholesalers, as we're talking with brewery owners, we find that these conversations are going really well. First of all, they're having them proactively. The wholesale partners are being very supportive. They want the breweries to survive and thrive. And what we're seeing is that, brewery or wholesalers are also saying, if they've got 7, 8, 9,000 SKUs that they're managing, there might be certain beers that you make that don't provide a great fit for those wholesale channels anyway. So maybe production beers will go in wholesale channels. Maybe your specialty or barrel-aged stuff or limited release stuff kind of goes through a direct-to-consumer channel. And we've seen a lot of evidence and had some very productive conversations with our brewery owners and wholesale partners. Okay, what about shipping? Okay, guys, we get lots of questions on shipping right now, as you might imagine. So we could spend an entire presentation right here, but we're not going to do it. We'll leave time for questions at the end, but there's some important things I want you guys to be aware of. So first of all, this can be a really great strategy for certain breweries, but I want you to be aware that it's not only the ABC laws of your state that regulate the shipping of your product, it's also the recipient state. So you need to be aware of both of those. And there's certain states that allow you to do this. There's certain states that are kind of in question, and there's certain states that strictly prohibit it. So it's important to know that. And then there's also logistics certification. So here in the US, we've got UPS and FedEx. FedEx is kind of bowing out at this point in terms of beer shipments, and that's what they've officially have on their website right now, although I do know some beers that continue to go through. Out on the West Coast, you have some additional options with like GSO as another logistics provider. I think that we're going to see a lot more options here if this continues as a trend in the craft beer space, where there's going to be other logistics providers that are going to be popping up. But if you're going to be working with UPS, it does require you working with an agent there. You're going to have to get a separate account number. You're going to negotiate rate tables, and then you're going to have to set up lots of basically work with our customers to help with all of that, and then help them kind of figure out how to kind of get their shipping set up. So it is more complex, but for the right breweries, if you've got highly sought after beers and you've got people in other places that want them, it can be, it's very successful for a lot of our breweries. So something else to consider here is that there's additional regulations. You might have to set up and get a direct-to-consumer license in those states that you're shipping to. Certainly, there's the potential and probability that you will have to register with the Department of Revenue. Then there's going to be certain things like excise taxes and other filing requirements, so you'll need to be aware of those. And beware of exclusions. This includes not only states that you're, not even, kind of encompasses states that you're not legally able to go to, but also within states that you are legally able to go to, there might be certain areas like dry counties and things like that that will have to be listed as exclusions. Okay, so lots of information we could cover on shipping. I'll stop there for now, and we'll get into it on question and answers here. And I'll quickly get to my next slide. Okay, so Landon mentioned that 40% of eCoast customers don't have an e-commerce setup. So guys, I wanted to spend a little time here just thinking about this. Like, once again, if this was 8 weeks ago, this would be completely different. How do we get something in place for you as quickly as possible? Now that we're 8 weeks removed, and business is about to change again as businesses start to open back up and taprooms start to open back up. So I think this is even more important. But when you're considering an e-commerce and direct-to-consumer program, you really want to start from the high level. Understand, what are the business goals and drivers behind this? Like, why is e-commerce and direct-to-consumer an important part of our strategy? And what is the customer experience that we're trying to create with this strategy? And if you're able to define those things succinctly, and we've already talked about the margins and the advantage of having that consumer feedback and the ability to control the experience. Those are all drivers here. So if we can define those, then the strategies and tactics are going to fall out of that. And this is a framework that we use at Craft Peak internally from all of our strategic initiatives with our business partners. But also, this is the process that we use to kind of guide breweries through the same conversation. So define your business goals, understand why those are important to you, define the customer experience that you're trying to create, and then the strategy and tactics fall out of that. And then right after that, we get a lot of questions on, well, what is the tool? Well, guys, there's a bunch of different ways to tackle this, and it's going to be different for every brewery. So I want to keep this fairly general, but I can answer specific questions later on. And it really kind of comes down to, once again, why are you trying to do this as a business? So you want to select your tools based on that filter. So if you can define what your goals are and the customer experience that you're trying to create, then you can use that as a filter to evaluate tools to determine what's going to allow me to achieve my short-term goals and my long-term goals, and what is going to allow me to create the desired customer experience that I'm trying to bring to the world and to my customers. And then the third thing is, what also is going to give me the feedback to make sure that we're on track here, that is the right customer experience, and give me enough data to learn how to iterate and improve that experience, because that's an important part of it here. We're just learning this in many senses, and breweries are just many are just kind of starting along this path. So your customers are going to get more sophisticated. You're going to want to get more sophisticated. So what is the data that's kind of driving that experience? So those three things: what allows me to achieve short-term and long-term goals, what allows me to achieve my desired customer experience, and provide me the data I'm looking for to iterate. Okay, so the one question that we can kind of use to summarize all of this is, if you use this question as a filter, this will help you set up your e-commerce strategy and the tools that you need to make this work. So does this solution allow us to achieve the customer experience we're trying to create? And when you think of solution, think about it in the context of three things. Your solution is the people, the technology, and the strategy. Do I have the right people in place with the right skill sets? Do I have the right technology? And do I have the right strategy in place that allows me to achieve that customer experience? So does this solution allow us to do it? Yeah. Do these people, technology, and strategies allow us to do that? And if you use that question, you're going to be well on track here. Okay, so the last thing that we'll talk about before we turn it over to Matt here is just what are some of the realities versus results that we're seeing. And guys, we're seeing it all over the board at this point. So let me be absolutely clear that just by starting an e-commerce program doesn't mean it's going to necessarily be a boon for your business. There's got to be a lot of thought and effort and intent that goes into it. So it's a dynamic landscape that continues to evolve rapidly. And we're going to try to do a better job at Craft Peak getting more of this information that we are learning from our clients out there to share with other breweries. But it is evolving rapidly, and we need to be prepared for that. The second thing is that there are absolutely no magic bullets. There's no one-click fix here, and there's no one solution that's going to work for everybody. You really need to go back to understanding why it's important for your business and then working from that mindset. And then the other thing that we're seeing, guys, just in general, is like you're getting out of it what you're putting into it. If anybody had the opportunity to attend the live stream for Brew last week, we had other half on there. It was Trillium, it was WeldWorks, and you know, they're talking about the impacts of COVID-19 and what the future looks like for them. And what the folks from other half will tell you is that their revenue hasn't dropped. They're selling out all of their beer, but their business looks completely different. They're on the hustle right now. They're running around the city making deliveries. They're converting taproom staff to delivery drivers, to taproom staff to people that are manning pickup locations. So guys, their business looks different, but they're on the hustle and it's working for them. And that's what I think we see in general across the board, is like the ones that are really going after it right now, although it looks different, it feels different, but they're making it work. So I think in general, what we're seeing is that even within our clients, but as we look across kind of the landscape in general, some are doing okay. Some are, you know, generating enough money that they're able to pay some bills, maybe keep some staff on, maybe have some additional capital to relaunch the business here when they're able to. Some are doing pretty good where, you know, it might not be quite the level of what they're expecting when their tap rooms are open, but it's enough to keep staff on, and they might be working on some internal projects. And then some are doing great. Believe it or not, we've got some breweries that are outperforming what they do with their taproom sales. And now those conversations are getting really interesting as they are now looking strategically to the future and saying, we're going to pull a greater percentage of our beer out of some of our other channels, like distribution channels, and go more directly to consumer. So guys, I am going to stop there. I want to make sure we leave plenty of time for questions at the end, but more importantly, I think I would love for you guys to hear from Matt Miller. Once again, he's the co-founder of Bearded Iris in Nashville, Tennessee. And Matt and his team are doing an amazing job adapting their business model in this crisis. And I look forward to Matt sharing his thoughts with you. So Matt, I'll turn it over to you, buddy.
Thanks a lot, John. Hope everyone can hear me out there. Appreciate you guys taking the time to sit down and tune in and hear what we have to say. I just want to echo a few of the sentiments that both Landon and John have discussed. And I think that I can kind of assist in contextualizing some of the experience that exists for other brewery owners that exist that are currently experiencing a completely unknown landscape and economic situation and some of the challenges that come along with that. All right. So I just want to start by saying, like so many other brewery owners out there, kind of wearing a lot of hats right now, as we all normally do. I know that it's not uncommon for all of us to have our hands in a lot of different parts of the business. So, you know, for my specific situation, you know, managing production and product development, strategic planning for business operations, management of our team and the various channels, in addition to constantly developing the systems that we're using. I'm sure that this sounds very similar to a lot of other folks in the room. And I know that can be a little difficult sometimes when things get disrupted and you need to quickly assess where you need to focus. So I'm hoping that some of our experiences can kind of assist others in gaining some context for what to focus on. Here's a quote, which is something that we kind of speak on from time to time at the brewery, which is, very frequently we're making decisions with as much information as possible at the time that the decisions are made. And I think that speaks to a level of adaptability, which is a very helpful component for how businesses benefit from thinking right now. So adaptability and agility is a core value at Bearded Iris. And it's something that we're always trying to stay in touch with, whether it's, you know, a core brand product like Homestyle, where we're constantly measuring its quality and ensuring that it's staying at the proper status for it to succeed to the degree that we want it to. And we're paying attention to the things that influence its outcomes. And what that allows us to do is prioritize the newest information as soon as we receive it. So we're constantly open to what we're learning day by day. And that constant assessment ends up informing our best practice. So what previously may have been the way that we do things may not be what it looks like in the future. And that has led us into this e-commerce section where clearly there's been a large volume of disruption that's occurred. So just for a little bit more context, I know that Landon spoke initially about our age and the scale of which we've grown, which I feel like is a helpful factor for offering advice or having some context for what other breweries may be experiencing. So some factors about us that I think are helpful is that we have been functioning for 4 years, and we have produced, like you said, very early, in the 800 barrels a year volume, and now we're moving closer to 10,000 barrels. So we've seen a lot of different landscapes, and for us right now, we're currently dealing with a situation which is we have an in-house canning operation. We're doing taproom items to go. We can also crowler our beer, and we're selling some products to distro. So I say this because I think it's important for everyone to understand that there isn't like a catch-all that is the solution. It's important to be conscious of the individual factors that shape everyone's decision making. So I know that, like Landon was previously saying, there was a lot of legislative obstacles in the South and in Tennessee, and some of these factors have influenced how we are currently operating. Won't be the same for everyone else. So I think that that's an important factor to consider. But moving on to e-commerce specifically, in Tennessee, this was a channel which had been desired for a long period of time, and generally speaking, antiquated beer laws in the South have a habit of really kind of sticking around and being a little challenging to make progress on. So legislature had previously blocked our ability to directly sell to consumers. This was something that we, as a local brewers entity, the Tennessee Brewers Guild, we had been developing an attempt to capture the opportunity to sell direct to consumer, and this platform was allowed because of the disruption that has occurred from COVID-19. So it was something that we jumped into as soon as we could. I know that at times it can feel like there's a little bit of paralysis when it comes to needing to make quick shifts. So it was nice to know that we were in a position that would allow us an opportunity to connect directly with our customers. So with that in mind, we were able to focus a little bit more on one of our other core values, which of course is a connection with our customers. And as John was previously saying, in addition to the revenue implications that come from selling direct to consumer, which he described in great detail, it provided another opportunity for us to dive in on another one of our core values, which is the way that we interact with our customers. So not only has e-commerce assisted us in being able to navigate through challenging and changing revenue structures, but it's also allowed us to connect more directly with our consumers and dive a little bit deeper on the manner in which we pay attention to the things that they're saying, look for an opportunity to hear them clearly and understand a little bit better what their needs are. And like John also previously said, the response from that has been positive, and it's making us reflect back on how our ability to adapt, our interest in connecting with our customers is creating positive outcomes. Back to the point, which is how everyone's situation is different. Speaking with specificity about what we're seeing would be totally different to what the other individuals who are listening and contemplating what their plans may specifically look like may be. But as a general philosophical concept, I think that there's been a lot of positives that have come from the path which has led us to connecting with our customers through e-commerce. So moving on. We're going to continue to assess our strategies and plans. And I think that this is a pretty important factor, is that, yes, we do have a relatively concise understanding for what today looks like, and we have an understanding for how we got here. And when that using like since we're to make it and be creative, that'll assist in adding these.
All right, I think we might have lost Matt there. John, do you want to jump back in on your slide here? I know you've got another slide coming up.
Yeah, I think so. And once we get Matt back, and we'll have him kind of redress this this slide here. Actually, I need to grab control.
There.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Yep. Actually, let me do this. I'm going to back up just one here, and okay. Guys, I think we'll let Matt get back into it, but you know, kind of as at the end here, what I wanted to do was, let's see. Oh, there we go. Okay, so guys, this is really kind of a summary of many of the concepts that we talked about here. So what is the opportunity at hand for breweries? And I think there's some things that we just kind of need to be reminded of and aware of here, and that uncertainty remains. So even as we're talking about these things today, we don't really have a good sense of when our breweries are going to open back up and to what extent, and you know, how long these changes are going to be, you know, in terms of social distancing and other things. How long are they going to be in play and continuing to have an impact on those businesses? And, you know, if you, once again, I'll kind of refer to that Brewbound live cast last week, where the folks from Trillium, you know, they've done so much to kind of create experience in their business. And they've got a restaurant with a seating capacity of 500. And they're kind of really looking at it at the long term. And they say that, you know, they believe that this is going to be continue to be a challenge, an issue for them until there's a vaccine in place. So they're really thinking that they're going to have modified versions of their business, you know, 12 to 18 months at least in the future. Now, that could change at any time, but that's part of that uncertainty, is we just don't know at this point. So the second thing is that businesses may look very different moving forward. And I think that was what Matt was describing, is that you know, while they're adapting and they're modifying the plan, you know, some of the other examples that we've discussed, it's, you know, these businesses are making it work, but they're doing so looking different than they did 10 weeks ago and previous to that. So I think that's important to also think about. And associated with these things, you know, there can be that fear, uncertainty, and doubt associated with all of this. And I think we're all in this right now, because anytime there's uncertainty and there's something scary like coronavirus, you know, there's the ability to have that fear, uncertainty, and doubt, which we kind of refer to as FUD. But I think it's important to remember that it's okay that businesses look different. We just have to find our way through. And in order to do that, innovation and disruption are part of the equation here. And what gives me such great confidence in the brewing industry is that is exactly what this industry was built on. It's built on innovation, ingenuity, creativity, grit, desire, hard work. And that's exactly what we need here. So as I look at other industries and I compare them to where we are in craft beer, I know that the DNA and ethos of craft beer is alive and well, and that gives me full confidence as to our ability to kind of make it beyond where we are today, and in some shape or fashion, being able to take advantage of the opportunities that are in front of us. And I think the very last thing, and this is probably something that we've mentioned over and over again, and I think it's always fun to hear it directly from a brewery's experience, and Matt provided that, but it's the ability to focus on the customer experience. Once again, as markets go to commodities, and I don't want to offend any brewers out there and say that beers are going to become commodities, but in every market, as products become more indistinguishable or more ubiquitous, it is the experience that is going to differentiate. And you guys do that to an amazing extent in your tap rooms and the experiences that you create there. So this is really the opportunity to also continue to do that in your other connection points of your business. And once again, as Matt said, those can be completely different and unique to your brewery. A brewery that is not in New York City or Boston, but in a rural area will have different demands, but it doesn't mean that experience is any less important. And then from there, I just want to leave, and we'll kind of wrap it up for questions here in just a moment, but leave you with a couple of thoughts. And This is really kind of a summarized quote from a guy named Ray Dalio. And I don't know if anybody's paying attention to Ray Dalio right now, but we're talking about many of the economic forces that are in play. And if you look back over the last 600 years, there's these major disruptions that happen about every 50 to 100 years. And he really kind of points to the fact that the last one really happened in 1945 as we were coming out of World War II, and a reestablishment of kind of global powers and money being printed and kind of put into the economy, double-digit unemployment, a 10% loss in GDP. So a lot of the things that we're seeing today. But the one thing that remains is that the greatest force we have in humanity is our ability and capacity to adapt. So, we started off this presentation with a great quote from Darwin, and I just absolutely love that quote, Landon. But that's really it, guys. It's our ability to push through the fear and work together to adapt. And we've got to work together to figure this out. But it is really the human capacity in order to do that. And then the last piece here is, guys, the ultimate customer experience. One of the benchmarks that we try to use at Craft Peak is developing the ultimate human experience. Well, guys, that's not a destination. You're never going to get there, but it's going to be the North Star that guides you. It is the goal that you're going to constantly be chasing after and working to improve towards that ultimate goal. So just a reminder to everybody that this isn't a destination, it's a journey, and really encouraging you to kind of embrace that mindset as we move forward into some of these unknown, scary, unpredictable territories. But also, hopefully it gives you the levity to be able to pick that head up and take advantage of some of the strategic opportunities that we have in front of us that are being kind of created from COVID-19.
Yeah, thanks for that wrap, John. I think that's really insightful advice. And to you and Matt, thank you both for your time. We did have a couple of questions come in so far. So for anyone else who has questions for John or Matt, or more unlikely myself, feel free to drop those in your Zoom screen. The first question we have is for Matt. I would love to have some tips on logistical best practices for local delivery, including scheduling deliveries, delivery speed, order minimums, and managing delivery fees.
Sure. So the current system that we're working with, not to get too specific, is our taproom team is currently working to assist in making deliveries. Obviously, as some of our front of house team members' hours have changed dramatically in the time period in which the taproom has been closed and transitioned into to-go beer. We are working with them to make some deliveries. So that's been assistant in like keeping those team members' hours. They are doing local deliveries for us. We're only able to, the legislature which was passed was an allowance to deliver within our home county. So there's like a proximity value gain that we have there that's a little bit more administrable for us. It's not like we can deliver to every county in Tennessee and we're trying to figure out very hyper specific logistics. So as far as local deliveries are concerned, I think that it has like an administrability value for us, which is despite the fact that we would like to be able to reach more people, we're only able to sell to the county in which we create the products in. So for us, that's Davidson County and Nashville. So we're able to use our team to manage those deliveries. As far as the specificity to how their schedules are made, that's like an organic thing that's informed daily based on the volume of sales that we have and based on the random proximity of orders. So there are a few tools to create like advantageous delivery maps, which would just be one Google search away essentially. But in addition to shipping products outside of our local county, that's something that we don't actually do. So we can't send any beer via the mail. Everything is like a physical delivery. So we do have some infrastructure for selling merchandise and products that aren't beer online, and we use a multitude of suppliers and carriers for that. So I'm not sure if that answers the question, but kind of specific to our experience, we're doing local deliveries, and that's made it a little bit more approachable for us.
John, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, Landon, thanks for that. And I was going to say, guys, we're seeing breweries do this a lot of different ways. And I think it really kind of comes down to the unique circumstances of your brewery, where you're located, and what your policy is. And I would say that for a number of our breweries, what they're trying to do is define a certain radius around their brewery that they will deliver to. And then they're trying to just be, what we find is working the best is just setting clear communication. So if you have an online store that people are able to shop for your beers, before they get into that, let them know what the policy is and kind of the workflow. So, and it really varies greatly. And I think that probably our team would be able to share, many of their insights with you. So if you have specific questions, please reach out to us and we could probably provide some more specific answers. But I will say that a number of our breweries, what I'm seeing is that, okay, if you have orders in by a certain time the day before, that's the cutoff. Maybe it's 11 a.m. And you know that if anything after 11 a.m., it's going to be delivered the next day. So you just kind of communicate those cutoffs in advance. And then, just try to keep it as simple as possible. Like, keep it simple for the time being, and then you'll evolve and iterate on top of that. So a lot of different ways to do it. I would say that try to get organized with great communication, try to set limits in terms of like specific cutoffs, just make sure that those are well communicated. And we find that people are having a lot of success just by keeping it simple and over communicating.
Yeah, I think that's good insight. And we've seen much of the same. So again, a lot of this will depend on the volume of orders that you're receiving, but we've seen some breweries do deliveries by neighborhood by day. So for example, they'll make all South End deliveries on Monday and downtown deliveries on Tuesday and so on. Others will place varying order limits depending on geography. So if you live in, let's say, a 3-mile radius of the brewery, the minimum order for delivery is $30. If it's 5 miles, the minimum order volume is $50, and so on. We do think with our partnership with DoorDash, again, all Ecos customers get their first week free on that. Depending on the market that you're in, assuming DoorDash is available in your market, if you make 100 deliveries using that service, that can save you anywhere from $500 to $1,500 in delivery fees. But again, that service is more instantaneous. About 95% of DoorDash deliveries are executed within 30 minutes. So a way to counter that is if somebody does not hit a certain order threshold, and maybe they only order 1 4-pack, but they want it now, you can pass along the delivery fees to your customer. Again, depending on where they live, that may only be $6 or $7, which would ordinarily be a tip for your driver anyway. So we've seen other breweries tackling it that way as well.
Yeah, Landon, I would agree with everything that you said there. Absolutely.
Yep. All right, one more question. Matt, start with you. What strategies have you found to be successful in raising awareness of direct-to-consumer channels on social media?
Yeah, well, I think that a lot of the traction that we've seen is perhaps a manifestation of some previous investment in those tools, not only financially, but also just as a portion of building our identity. As I previously said, we make a conscious effort to connect with our audience, and whether that's in the tap room or on Instagram or through our website, we're regularly directing people there to gain information. So we have our online store set up on our website, and we're communicating with people through Instagram to advise them to go there. So if we're kind of like embedded in the manner in which we are promoting our products, which are releasing once a week, we're acknowledging that a new product is available on our social media channel, which has become a practice that individuals are familiar with, and then advising them that it is available through the channels that we have habitually used in the past. So for us, it was a little bit of being able to pivot into, or I guess kind of just adapt slightly into something that has already been built for us as far as like infrastructure for gaining an audience and directing people's attention to certain places. But our web store is in the info portion of our Instagram account, and if we're referencing people that delivery options are available locally, we can advise them to click that link in our bio. So things like that, I think are how we're approaching it, generally speaking, our biggest outreach would be through our social media channels of and Instagram.
Yeah, and before John cutting it over to you, the one thing I would tack onto that, Matt's exactly right. Make your call to action very, very specific. If you want to send people to your online store, put a link in your Instagram bio and tell people to click the link in your Instagram bio. Or of course you can link directly in, you know, the Instagram caption itself. You can tell people to sign up for your new membership club or advise them of a pre-release that you have coming. Make those very, very specific. Those sales activities, bring them to your social media, but also make sure that the action that you're requesting of the customer is very clear in that communication as well. With that, I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, you know, just to build on that, use all of your channels. So if you got a great email list, you know, put out emails. If you're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram is obviously the workhorse of the craft beer industry. Our clients are doing all of those things. So wherever your potential buyers are, absolutely connect with them there. And just like these guys are saying, drive them back to your website. Use those channels to drive them back to the website or the web store, and then make it perfectly obvious for people what they need to do next. So maybe have some banners that allow people to more easily know that you have delivery and pickup options, or, you know, if it's delivery, pickup, and shipping. Those are then calls to actions that direct you right into the transaction. And you have to remember that these are very transactional transactions. It's a great user experience, but we don't want people to stall out or get confused when they're looking to purchase something. We want to make that process as easy as possible. So just like you guys said, use those channels that are relevant to your business, but make it as simple as possible. Make that call to action as clear and direct as possible.
I think that's all we have in the question. I'll give another 15 seconds or so for any final questions here. I guess while we wait for those final questions to come in, we do have additional webinar series coming through this week. Tomorrow at 1:30 is Ecos Tips and Tricks. That'll be with Taryn Rossi of our customer success team. Thursday, we'll be talking about finance strategies during a crisis. That'll be led by Chris Farmand of Small Batch Standard. And then Friday, we're taking more of a roundtable approach where we'll be joined with a number of our existing customers who have been pushing the innovative envelope throughout the crisis and even leading up to it. So with that, I think our Q&A is done. If you have any questions for me, you can reach me at landon@goecos.com. John, I'm assuming you're cool with sharing your email.
Absolutely.
Yeah, john@craftgeek.com. And if you want to reach Matt Miller, go drink a beer in Nashville with him next time you're there.
Well said. It's so worth it, man. Grab a home style.
Everyone,
thank those guys.
Yep. Thank you all so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.